Greetings, folks. Welcome back. In this short video, we're going to talk about perfectly competitive markets, or what we call perfect competition. Some basic concepts of competitive markets. First off, you have lots of buyers and sellers. Second, the sellers are producing the same product or homogeneous product. And third, there are no barriers to entry or exit. In other words, firms can enter the industry, and likewise firms can exit with no barriers. And then another concept of a competitive market is that price equals marginal revenue. And as we'll see later, this is unique to perfect competition, where firms are what we call price takers. The reason they're price takers is because there are just so many sellers that none of them have any influence on price. So then the question is, well, how is price determined in a perfectly competitive market? Well, it's determined by the market as a whole. So in the left panel here, you see your basic demand supply graph. You've got price on the y-axis, quantity on the x-axis. You have a downward sloping demand curve, upward sloping supply curve, and that determines price, which is then the marginal revenue to any individual firm. So you have a market over here, which then determines the marginal revenue to any individual firm in a perfectly competitive market. So we can look at this figure here to try to determine the profit maximizing quantity for a firm in a perfectly competitive market. So of course the profit maximizing rule is that you operate where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So it's just this point right here. So the quantity that this firm would produce is right here, again, where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. There's right there, Q star. So now the question is, how much profit would that firm? So the question now is, how much profit would that firm make? So remember, the definition of profit is total revenue minus total cost. The revenue is just simply the price multiplied by the quantity. So you've got the price up here and the quantity. So the revenue would be this large rectangle here. The cost would be found by multiplying the quantity they'd be producing by the average total cost. So this smaller rectangle here would be the cost. So now we can draw in what the profit would look like. So this would be the profit, the difference between the total revenue, but you subtract from that the cost. So there's your revenue, which we saw a moment ago. Here's the cost. And then here is the profit, or the revenue minus cost. So what might happen, remember we said one of the features of a perfectly competitive market is there are no barriers to entry. So if these firms are earning a profit, additional firms would enter the market. And we know that one of the factors that increases supply or shifts out a supply curve would be the number of sellers. So as the new entrants come in, the supply shifts out, which lowers the price in the market, which then lowers the marginal revenue to any individual firm. So now we can look again at the profit maximizing quantity. Just as before, the firm would produce where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, which is right here. So this is the quantity. We'll draw in a Q here. There's a little bit better one here. All right, so that's the new profit maximizing quantity. So now the question is, well, how much profit does that firm make? So it's the same calculation as before. You take the price times quantity. That gives you the total revenue. Then you take the quantity multiplied by the average total cost of making that quantity. That gives you the cost. So if the total revenue is this rectangle and the total cost is this rectangle, when you subtract the cost from the revenue, you get no profit. So here we can see this again. Your total revenue is the price times the quantity. Total cost is the average total cost of producing that quantity times the quantity. So the profit is revenue minus cost, or in this case, this firm in a perfectly competitive market is making no profit, which is what you would expect to happen in the long run. In the short run, you might have some profits, but as we saw a moment ago, that profit would attract new entrants, and that increase in supply would drive down the price. So what did we learn? In a perfectly competitive market, let's say that price is high for whatever reason. Let's say there was just an increase in demand. So if prices are high, firms can make profits in the short run. Profits, though, attract new entrants, as we saw. That those new entrants will increase market supply, which lowers the price and wipes out profits. I guess if price was low for whatever reason, you could have a case where competitive firms have losses in the short run. Of course, losses drive firms out of the industry, or exit occurs. When that happens, there's a reduction in market supply due to the exiting firms, which increases price and then wipes out the losses. So again, kind of over the long term, or in the long run, perfectly competitive firms typically do not earn any profit. So that's it for perfect competition, and we'll see you next time.